Welcome, welcome to Homeschool Moms Unfiltered. Today, we are going to be talking about scheduling. My name is Megan, and my fabulous co host here is.
Amanda, hello, hello.
Hello. So we are a relatively new podcast and learning as we go to some extent, right? Which is kind of very homeschooly of us, right? Just jump in and figure things out as we go and
Mhm.
all of that. So it kind of fits the vibe of our theme. And so one of the things we've decided to add at the start is just kind of a quick daily recap because I think sometimes there's this mentality that maybe your life is the only life that looks like a complete circus act sometimes. And Amanda and I have both arrived to recording today like, what the hell? Like, right, this whole day has just been like a complete zoo, right? And so it's
Yeah.
like, no, right? We're all doing that together. So just a quick recap. Because you haven't even had a chance to tell me. I just know that it's been a day. So what
Mhm.
has your day comprised of, Amanda?
Yeah, so Friday mornings, my kiddo has a class at 9 a.m. that he likes to attend. And he doesn't like to wake up at 9. He doesn't like to be like up and ready. And so every Friday morning, it's a little bit of a struggle. But then every other Friday morning after that class, we go to the library for a Spanish story time and Spanish practice, which is challenging, but he really wants both of them, but he doesn't want to take responsibility for making both of them happen. So it's always a bit of a struggle. And this morning he couldn't find his shoes because apparently they were still in my car, but I didn't know that. So then he was trying to put on other shoes. He couldn't get them on. And I was like, you are 10 years old. You should be able to figure out how to put shoes on. And then he was sitting on the floor crying because he was super overwhelmed. And I was like, get in the fucking elevator. We are going to be late. It's here. Like, we live in a big condo building. And so, when the elevator finally comes, like, you want to catch it. And it was messy. And we got there and then it was canceled. They didn't even freaking have it. And I was like, oh, you got to be kidding me. Like, all right. So then we went ahead and picked up the books that we had on hold, and that was fine. And we got home and things were going along okay. But then a friend called, and of course I'm going to be there for my friend. But like, her life is currently a shit show, and she was at her daughter's like end of year picnic thing, and she was crying, and she was like, I just need to talk to someone. And I'm like, I'm here for you for 45 minutes. I can do 45 minutes and then I really have to go. Right. And then I got off the phone with her and I was like, okay, kid, you have to go make your lunch because it's going to take 15 minutes in the oven and then you're going to want to eat it and you have to be finished before I go sit down for podcasting. And he was like, yeah, okay, okay. And then I was trying to eat and the first thing I grabbed out of the fridge had gone bad. And I was like, of course, the thing that I had that was supposed to be easy to eat real quick before I sit down and record for a couple of hours, like, this is no problem. All right. No, yep, I've got it. I have it. I made it. I was a couple minutes late logging on, but I made it. It's only one. I don't even know. It's only 1 in the afternoon. Like, I could
It can
say it
either
will
get
only.
way better or way worse as you go on.
I was gonna say it can only go up, but we're talking about me and my luck, so it's surely going to go down from here. But I will survive the day. It will be okay.
Oh my goodness, that is a bit of chaos. My day doesn't seem as chaotic in contrast. I'm not a huge lover of running errands. Like outside is very people-y and there's traffic and stand in line and this and that. And I forgot that it's a holiday weekend, so we're recording this on the Friday of Memorial Day weekend. And everybody and their brother was out running errands.
Yes.
I live only a few minutes from the bank, and it took me 24 minutes to get to the bank. We got there, and it had taken us so long to get there. My daughter sent a text to her best friend right as we were leaving for the bank, and we were almost at the bank. I could see it, and we still couldn't get to it. And I said to her, what time did you send that text when we left the house? And so she told me, and I go, it's been 24 minutes. Like, I was just by the time I got home, I was like a little bit frazzled and I only got home like 20 minutes before we were supposed to start. So it was just silly errands. It was like Joanne, Aldi, the bank, like whatever, but everything just felt like it took a long time today. So we got it done. So that's the good news. But man, I'm like, I am not leaving the house again today. It's just not happening. We're
Right.
done. That was my outdoor time. I've completed it. The end. So
Yes.
it kind of dovetails really well into our topic of scheduling for today because Right? The best laid plans are not always necessarily how your day is going to go. But our
Hmm.
topic for today is scheduling, how to structure your homeschool day. And there really is no right or wrong way to structure your homeschool day. So we'll kind of talk about what works for us and maybe some things that you should take into consideration when you're structuring your day.
Yes.
One of the joys of homeschooling is freedom. So but I don't know. Are you like me, Amanda? Sometimes when you have too much freedom, you don't know where to start because there's too many possibilities. It's like a blank slate is more overwhelming sometimes than having some parameters to work within.
Yeah. And I would say in our house for sure, it is much easier for us to have a schedule that we change and adjust than to have no schedule and be like, hey, let's do, like we can be all kinds of flexible with what we had planned and reschedule things and move things around. But if we don't have anything at all planned, the chances of us just sitting in our pajamas and reading all day, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but that cannot be considered school 365 days a year.
It can in my household. Okay. I
not
am the
not in my
unschooler of
academic
us.
aggressive household, okay?
Exactly. Yes. If you want to have pajama days and read books, you come to my unschooling household and we're going to have all sorts of fun. So it'll be great. So, yeah, let's get ready to dive in and chat scheduling.
Yeah, that sounds great. But before we dive in, I want to go ahead and thank our premier sponsor, Hub of Curiosity. Hub of Curiosity. All right, it's one of those days. Hub of Curiosity offers a wide range of virtual co ops, hands on STEM classes, and incredible multidisciplinary learning opportunities on OutSchool. You can access their class listing through the link on our IG bio or in the description on this post. So definitely go check them out. Lots of great things there.
Awesome. I know one of my kids is starting school newspaper next week with Hub of
Oh,
Curiosity,
yeah, I saw that.
which I'm super pumped about. All the kids take on different roles of, and they can do anything. So if you have a kiddo who's a reluctant writer, or maybe that's just not their strong suit, but you're trying to kind of ease them in, they can do photography, they can do crossword puzzles for the newspaper. They can write about something that's of interest to them, right? They can write about sports. They can write about a new game that just came out, anything like that. So it's kind of a really low pressure way to ease in. He normally works with Martha Jackson, who's an amazing OutSchool tutor for writing throughout the year. And she's taken off for the summer to be with her kids. So this was kind of like a nice way to keep those skills sharp over the summer in an area that he has expressed an interest in improving, but at the same time doesn't enjoy the task of actually doing the improve. Like it's just not his favorite jam, but also realizes that there's a need. So it's kind of a good marriage of both of those things. So it's pretty good.
Yeah.
So I am going to guess, based upon your intro from before, that our scheduling looks very different, which is totally cool. If you're new to our podcast, Amanda and I homeschool very differently, but both completely acknowledge and respect the way the other one functions, and that it works awesome for their family and their our respective kiddos. So my household, I have 3 kids, 16, 15, and almost 13. I legitimately, it's been such a day that before we started, I said to Amanda, he's not 13 yet, right? This upcoming birthday is 13. Like it took me a minute. That's how frazzled I am from my outdoor time today. So yeah, 16, 15, and almost 13. And we are pretty loosey-goosey as far as our scheduling is concerned. I have no sleeping and waking requirements. The only requirement that I have about sleep is that you get a healthy number of hours of sleep. When you accomplish that, generally speaking, is up to you. Now, I do have one kid who would be completely nocturnal if given the choice. And that just doesn't work for the rest of the household to an extent. So she is allowed to stay up late. She is allowed to sleep in late, but she does have to sleep sometimes when it's dark outside and be awake definitely when it's light outside. And there are sometimes, like at the end of a school semester, she takes college classes, and that last week or two sometimes where she's really cranking through to get all of her stuff done by the end of the semester and by her deadlines, where she will slip further and further into nocturnal habits. And then it takes a good week or two after that ends to kind of pull her back out of it and be like, no, you need to be awake during the daytime. And that's been since she's little. Like her circadian rhythm just really appreciates darkness, right? So but we have some structure in place there. She's got alarms that start at an agreed upon time that she and I agreed upon. What the first alarm kind of says, okay, it's time to start winding down whatever you're working on. And then the second alarm says, like, okay, if you're getting a shower before bed, now's the time, and then the third alarm is like, you should be in bed by now and doing something relaxing. And so there's this whole stepping down process for her to kind of try to get her ready at that hour. So we've got that, but my boys self-regulate a little bit differently, and they sleep and wake when their bodies are tired, and they get their great amount of sleep. But generally speaking, we are a pretty night owl household. So, yeah, you can text me anytime. Never too late. The ironic thing is, I'm East Coast, Amanda's West Coast, so we're 3 hours difference. And it'll be like 11 o'clock for Amanda, and she's still texting, and I'm still answering. It's 2 a.m. here, and I'm like, no problem. So our time zones work out pretty well. How does sleeping and waking work? Well, you've told us a little bit about your 9 a.m. this morning, right? But
Yeah.
generally speaking, how's your structure for sleep in your house, Amanda?
Yeah, so we have a little bit more structure around it, primarily because my kid does keep signing up for 9 a.m. classes. And it's kind of one of those things. I don't actually care that much what time he wakes up, as long as he's up for whatever he's asked me to pay for, right? So
Yes.
I paid for that. You have to actually wake up and make that happen. And the reality is he still needs a lot of sleep. So we also have alarms that kind of help get him there, right? So our general rhythm during the standard school year is an alarm at 8 p.m. that says, hey, if you're taking a shower, now's the time to do it. And then after the shower, he knows that's the time. Like, there's no more playtime. He has to lay down, and he has the choice between meditating or reading a book. He always picks reading a book. And that often goes on for a few hours. My goal is usually for him to be asleep by 10 p.m. because if he's asleep by 10 p.m., there's a pretty good chance he'll be up around 8:30, which gets us wherever we need to be by 9. Obviously, it doesn't always work. This morning, it clearly didn't. It was 9:05. I was like, hey, you're totally missing that class. And he was like, and he threw his blanket and like ran. I was okay. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, so I say that, but he is also one of those kids, right, who is he prefers to go to bed later, and he always has. When he was little and we were doing the whole like, do we sleep train? It became really clear, even as a teeny tiny baby, that he preferred to go to bed after 11 p.m. And if you let the teeny tiny baby go to bed at 11 p.m., that teeny tiny baby would wake up at 11 in the morning, happy as could be, and you got this huge chunk of time to do with as you pleased. And I was like, I'm all right, I'm there. Like, it looks a little different. All these people were like, oh, my baby goes to bed at 6 p.m. Like, not mine. We rock out all night long. But I can get up in the morning and I can have coffee and I can accomplish a whole bunch of things before he actually wakes up. And so, like, we're coming into summer, and that will mean that he'll probably be up until 11 or midnight a lot more frequently. It's a little different on the weekends, right? Because it's the weekend. Everything gets thrown off. But we did just recently actually have a big talk about what sleep deficit is and what that looks like. And I gave that responsibility to him. We have a thing, it's a throwback to my childhood, where on Sunday morning, we have actually pretty strict rules around TV and screen time in our house. And Sunday mornings, he gets to watch cartoons or documentaries or whatever he wants. And he has unlimited access. No, not unlimited access. He has his own access to the TV, right? We can't come in and say, oh, we want to watch this, or let's watch this as a family. Like, that's your time to watch the things that we have said, yes, you can watch on the TV, because we only have one TV in our place. And it's, so he has like 4 or 5 hours to binge watch TV on Sunday morning. But because of that, homeboy can wake up at like 7 a.m. on Sunday morning. Right.
The motivation is high.
Yes, exactly. So we have been looking at different options and what that looks like and trying to come up with things. we enforced some things when he was younger, and now we're focusing on this sleep deficit. You need this much sleep. So
Mm-hmm.
if you are going to short yourself 2 or 3 hours on Sunday morning, you need to be planning in a nap or at least some relax or rest time a day before, a day after, and making sure that you're getting that amount of sleep, because that's going to be one of those valuable skills, right? You're going to make these same kinds of bad choices. I still do it. There are days that I'm like, I stay up until 6 in the morning reading a book that I got super sucked into, and then my life does not allow me to sleep my full night starting at 6 a.m. So like we make these bad choices, and this is another one of those learning opportunities.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's awesome. Yeah, as long as you're getting a healthy amount of sleep.
Mhm.
There's this stigma with being an early riser or a night owl or a late
Yeah.
sleeper, right? Like the early bird is the socially acceptable one. People
Mhm.
who sleep until 10 or lazy, 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 right? And it's like,
Yeah.
but if you're awake for the same amount of hours and your productivity is the same throughout the day, what does it matter, right? As long as it's
Mhm.
comfortable for you and comfortable for your kids, it doesn't matter. And school, I think, has been a part of that, right? But also, we
Mhm.
talked in previous episodes about how our school system was designed to create worker bees. And
Mhm.
so, yeah, part of that is, being up. I mean, there were kids when we lived in Florida, there were kids at the bus stop in the dark, right?
Mhm.
And not in the season where it's darker later. Like,
Yeah.
you know, like, oh my goodness, dark. And I'm
Mhm.
like, holy cow, but it's training for being up and sitting in your car in traffic on the highway for
Mhm.
when you're an adult. And so it doesn't need to look that way. You can sleep until 9, 10, 11, whatever works for you and have an awesome and productive day. So
Yeah, that's
pretty
it. I
cool.
mean, if it works for you and it works in your house. We actually have an interesting situation where my husband is most of the time up by 6 a.m. and we live and work all together in a pretty small space. But the kiddo and I are both pretty heavy sleepers. So he can get up and take his shower and get on his calls and do all of that. And we're sometimes in the same room and sometimes, one room away. We can sleep through that, right? And so it's fine for us. I usually sleep an hour or two more. Our son usually sleeps 2 or 3 hours more. And we can make that work, right? And it doesn't, as long as you can find a way to make it work within your family and your house. What
Yeah.
it doesn't, yeah, like these outside stereotypes and influences of what has to happen. It doesn't.
Doesn't matter. Yeah. We're here. The whole thing of homeschooling is freedom to do what works for you. So it applies
Mhm.
to everything. Okay, so then school hours, right?
Mhm.
So we do not have school hours. We do have designated times that schooly type things occur. So, um, my so my oldest two are primarily college class kids at this point, my 16 and 15. And so they manage their schedule. My oldest son, particularly the best in the sense that he leaves for college before I'm even awake sometimes. And that's not to say it's early. I just don't like waking up early. And so that he gets up, he has himself some breakfast, and he's out the door with his bag and whatever else he needs. So that's awesome. My daughter, I swear the child might have narcolepsy, so that's a whole like 10 trips up the stair. Like get up, and she's just always been that way, and I know in the groups that in the Facebook groups it would be like, take everything away and she'll learn, and I'm like, she won't. She will just sleep through all of her classes and that'll be the end of that, right? So it's a bit of an effort to wake her up. But yeah, so they're kind of managing their class schedule and their assignments and all that kind of stuff. My youngest son is an insomniac, and he has been his whole life. He takes medication for sleep. And even still, that does not guarantee him a night of sleep. Most of the time, it does a pretty good job, but we still have periods of not sleeping or periods of him being in and out of my room for a snuggle or a back rub until 2 a.m. And he has been that way for forever. I mean, he's super duper neurodivergent, and sleep issues are not uncommon for neurodivergent kids. So it just is what it is, and it's totally fine. I'll take a bonus snuggle even if it's at 1 a.m. So it's all good. But we do not book classes. So you were saying like your 9 a.m. classes. We do not book anything before noon for him, especially because I was booking stuff, and then he would be up most of the night, unable to sleep. He'd come into my room at like 6 after having a really restless night of sleep, and he'd pass out soundly sleeping. And I'm like,
Mhm.
I'm not waking this kid up. And so we would just let him get his rest. And so finally, we just stopped booking anything before that.
Yeah.
But once everybody's up and moving, we do not have set school times. We kind of go with when things are offered. So they take a lot of classes on OutSchool, they take classes through the college, all that stuff. And so, yeah, they'll have stuff at all sorts of wacky times. I mean, my oldest was taking an investment course once at like 10 p.m. Central Time because the teacher lived in another country and that's when the class was offered. And he's awake, he's a night owl. So it didn't really matter. And so we just have our classes kind of coming and going whenever we want to, and our organic learning moments in between, which I'm sure, I know your household has all those organic learning moments as well, in addition to your scheduled things. Yeah, so we just kind of take each day as it comes. How about you? Do you have set school hours?
I wouldn't say it's necessarily set school hours, but generally speaking, we do start around 9:30. And that's, again, just because he has anywhere from 2, 3, sometimes 4 days a week where his morning starts at 9 a.m. with some other class. And so that's just kind of the habit. Even the days that he sleeps in, we're still kind of getting started by 9:30. In my ideal world, he would be done with school by noon, 1 o'clock at the latest, because we can really cover everything that we need to cover in that amount of time. The reality is he's taking a lot of classes, and every one of those classes, sometimes they're half an hour, but usually they're an hour. And so once you stick in 3-hour long classes, it's great that he wants to do an aerodynamics class and a Spanish class and a debate class and you know and you know um several reading like book classes that are on like you know series or things like that. I love it. But for me and in our home, he does still have to do a specific world history curriculum, and he does still have to do a specific math curriculum. And so we have these things that it's like, well, you have 3 classes today, maybe you don't have to do all of the things that are on our list, but you still have to do at least half of them. And tomorrow is an easier day with only 1 hour class and 1 half-hour class. So you have to do everything on the list tomorrow. That does mean, depending on how many classes he has in a day, we might go up to 3, maybe 3:30, but I try really hard to make sure, and he protects it himself pretty well. 3 p.m. on is, it's unscheduled. There's not like any of the extracurriculars, any of the drop-off classes, any of that stuff. He wants it finished before 3 so that he has from 3 until he goes to bed at 10, pretty much open and available for whatever he wants to do. So
Mm-hmm.
that's how we do it.
And I think from what I gather from just, being in the homeschool world for so long, so your kiddo is wanting to take these extra classes and things like that. But at his age, at age 10, typically the schedule would not be anywhere near that long. It's just his, I have a kid like that
Yes.
too, who needs more hours in the day, who's like, I'm taking on this. And we have to sit down sometimes and prioritize and say, like, girlfriend, what do you want to drop? Because this is too much. Right. And
Mhm.
so we have that problem too. But typically speaking, what do you think an average 10-year-old, like how many hours a day do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I really think that 3 hours a day of actual schoolwork is plenty for the average 10-year-old.
Mm-hmm.
And like you said, my kiddo is unique, and he's picking these classes. There are a few that I'm like, I would like you to do this because it's going to teach you how to annotate or, whatever. But most of the time it's like, oh, this sounds fun. Oh, I'd like to do this. Oh, I want to do this. Please, can I do this? And I'm really bad. That's one of my big struggles. I talked about it in an earlier episode of saying no, like, oh, you want to learn that? Great. I love it. I love that you want to learn that. Sure. Let's sign up for that. Sure. Let's do that. And then we get the semester started. We really struggled this year. I was on the group chat with our big mom group being like, I don't know what to do. We're up to 11 classes a week. Like, we're paying for 11 outside classes a week. First off, it's not cheap. But second off, like, holy hell, that's a lot of time. Like that could be his entire schedule alone. And I will, in our schooling defense, we're in this California charter system thing, and our oversight teacher, she's always like, I think you should cut back on like all of your other schoolwork. If he's going to have that many online classes, like just, like just do that. Like he's doing fine. But he doesn't want to just do that either, right? He's like, but I love the history. Can I please do
Right.
world history? And like, but I haven't done Beast Academy all week and it's time to do this. And I'm like, okay, like, okay, we'll find a way to make it work. Yeah.
Yeah. And I imagine there's a lot of people who might be listening to this particular segment of our conversation and being like, I can't get my kids to do any work. Like this is so completely unrelatable.
Yeah.
Right. And I
Mhm.
don't blame you, like, because I think that is more typical
Mhm.
than that. But I think the difference lies, at least from my perspective, and I'm gonna guess based upon what I know about your journey so far, Amanda, is like your kid's never been in an environment where schoolwork is work or schoolwork is a task or a chore or a requirement. I mean, you're requiring it, obviously, right? But
Mhm.
it's been presented in a way that it's like, wow, look at this like amazing learning opportunity. And the same for my kids. They've been home for so long. And for my kids in particular, too, everything is interest based. So it's not really hard to get your kids to need more hours in the day if everything that they're doing is functioning around interest. And so I think if you are listening and you're like, I can't get my kid to sit down and do like one single page, like this is so unrelatable that these people are like, our kids want more work and they want to do more things, we totally get it.
Yeah.
Like this wasn't a moment one thing, right? If you've had your kids in the public school system for 3, 4, 5, 6 years and you've taken them out, that curiosity, unfortunately, it's like a flame on a candle that's like barely alive, right? If at all. And so it's going to be a process to get to that point again where they realize that. I mean, we've kind of talked about that in our most current book club selection of Teach Your Own, about that kids are born that way. Kids are born like wanting to soak up information and
Mhm.
wanting as much information as humanly possible. But unfortunately, a lot of the steps through society have diminished that. So if you're not in that place, don't feel bad and don't be like, okay, there's something wrong with my kid. There's something wrong with me. We're doing this all wrong. Like, no, it's not you, right? It's not
No,
you.
yeah.
It's just your journey has probably looked quite different than ours has.
It has, and it's also a totally different mindset and a totally different way that you approach things, right? While I talk about being a very academic homeschooler, I don't actually give grades for anything, right? I don't feel like my kid needs to know a grade. He needs to know if he got it right or if he got it wrong, and we need to talk through how to improve it or how to do better. But there aren't grades. And I feel like grades really change the dynamic of how much kids are excited to do things and learn things. So I found taking that piece out once we left the brick and mortar school kind of pseudo environment that we were in helped a lot. And also finding what they are. It just so happens that right now my kid is clearly a history nerd. And so it's not uncommon for him to be taking 3, 4, sometimes 5 history classes a semester about all different things because they're things he wanted to do, things that caught his eye. And I'm sure, whatever you want to do and study and learn is cool. But it might be that yours really is drawn to game schooling. Maybe they want to do several Dungeons and Dragons themed classes or whatever. It's important to remember that that's still learning, and if they want to add in 3 of those a week, or maybe it's something more traditionally academic like chess, like fine, go for it. But there's a whole community of game schooling, and you can incorporate that. You can do it in person, you can do it on Outschool, you can do it through Game School Academy. There's so many different ways, right? And so finding a way that learning can be fun. It's hard, right? Like we were just saying, it is hard to get it started and like to kick it off when you first start homeschooling, and make sure that you're in that mentality of like, oh, learning can actually be fun. It doesn't have to be like a boring worksheet that you have to fill out and then see if you got an A on it kind of thing. Get it back with red ink. It doesn't have to be that way. And making sure that you're doing fun things and that you're allowing as many of the fun things as they want in the schedule, I think will make a big difference on how excited they are to do other stuff.
Mm-hmm. And I think the same can be said for reading, right? I mean, we live in a world where I think if we treated adults this way, right? Somebody tells you what to read. I'd be so annoyed if somebody dictated all that I had to read. Like, I want to pick my own books, right?
If I
Could
had
you
to read what you read, I would never read, right? And you wouldn't read if you read what was in my Kindle.
Right, exactly, right? So there's that, right? And then imagine being so there are people in book club. I'm in so many book club groups on Facebook, and there's a lot of people who like to journal their books throughout the year and keep lists and tallies and all that stuff. But they enjoy it and they do it because it's fun. I do not, right? I mean, I've started reading a book sometimes and been like, this sounds really familiar, and then realized I've read it before,
Uh-huh.
So I do not, right? But imagine having to log all your reading, both what you're reading and the time that you're reading,
Mm,
and then also having to like prove to someone that you read it and understood it.
mm,
Grown-ups would never read if we had to do that. And
yeah.
so if your kid's been in an environment where reading has been like this huge drudgery, awful thing, it's going to take some time to kind of bring that back around. But it's possible, right? I was not a reader all through school. I hated reading through school. I survived on Cliff Notes all through school
Mm,
because it was awful. But it was, I realized later, and I thought I wasn't a reader. And then I realized later as an adult, it was just the really crappy books they were trying to get me to read. Once I could start picking my own books, I was like, reading's amazing. Right. So it could be part of that environment because, yeah, I mean, I just completely BS'd my way through anything that had to do with, I'm like, oh, yeah, I read that book. Sure. I would like watch the movie, read the Cliff Notes, none of which ever was adequate. I somehow got through it. But yeah, I'm like, no, that doesn't work.
no, absolutely.
Yeah. So, and I will say, like, even though we don't have a schedule like what you're talking about, like on average from 9 to 3 or something like that, we kind of have what I like to refer to as a weekly rhythm.
Mm,
So, like my oldest is about to start his summer semester on Tuesday. And so because of that, like every Monday will be the same. He'll have the same hours and the same schedule. Every Tuesday will be the same as the prior Tuesday. Every Wednesday will be the same as the prior Wednesday. So even though our day to day is not the same, our week to week has a bit of a flow and a bit of a rhythm. Like, my kids all vend at the farmer's market. So I know Tuesdays and Saturdays have this rhythm. The boys play Pokemon on these days. So I know to expect that on those days. So our days all look very different, but our weeks kind of flow and we kind of have seasons like that. So it works.
mhm,
Because our schedule is super wacky though, we do not have like set meal times or anything like that. Somebody's always waking up, somebody's always going to sleep, and so it got really difficult the freer they got and the older they got. I would plan a dinner and then there's this cultural thing, especially in the US, and I imagine it's even more so in other countries, right, where like you have to sit down and eat as a family. It has to be like
mm,
your connection point. And if you're not doing that, you're like not connecting as a family. And I had a really hard time with that because I would make a dinner, all that, and then one kid would be like, I only ate like 2 hours. I only had lunch like 2 hours ago. I'm not hungry. Or like, it would be dinner time. Oh, well, now I'm ready to leave to go do X. And I'm like, what on earth? And so many times dinner was causing more stress than it was anything else,
mm,
trying to get everybody in the same place at the same time to eat. There's 7 of us, right? Because my parents live with us and my husband travels all the time and all that. And but I had a really hard time letting it go because culturally you're supposed to eat dinner together. That's how you connect as a family. And if you're not doing that, you're dropping the ball. And my mom finally was like, that's for people who go off to work and school all day long and then come home and they haven't seen each other all day. And that's their time to digest together as far as like, how was your day? How was your day? This, that, and the other thing. She's like, you
what
people
did
are
you
together
do?
all the time. She's like, you don't, if it's okay. And so my office is actually like right next to the kitchen. It's an open space. And so the kids come and go all day long, and there will be times where we all end up just standing around the island, eating together at the same time and just kind of doing our own thing and all of that. But it was hard to kind of let go of that. This is what families are supposed to do. But it
Mhm,
just wasn't working for the way our schedules work. Everybody was always like, ships sailing in a different direction all the time. And me trying to get everybody around a table at the same time was like herding cats. So we do it sometimes. We'll all sit down together and we'll play, board games are a big thing for us. So like that's more of our connection point. My
mm,
kids will go to my parents and be like, you guys want to play Monopoly tonight? And then it turns into a whole Monopoly thing. And it's like, why don't we get ice cream? And they'll have ice cream sundaes and stuff. So our points of connection turned out to be different. But even for me, who's like as super like burn the establishment down as I am, I really struggled with not having meal times like that in the beginning, but it's working for my family. So I was like, okay, it's working. How
yeah.
about you? I'm going to go with typical meal times at the Amanda household. So
Yeah, we do have pretty set meal times. We almost always have dinner together. Though I will say that part of that is because my husband works at home and he actually has very long work days. He usually finishes between 5 and 5:30. He has a small window, like a 2-hour break, and then he has to get back online at 7:30 and work for a few more hours. So in that small window there, we make sure that we have time together so that he's included in connecting with us. And so I think that probably plays a bigger part of why we make sure that we have that kind of dinner time together at that time. That said, it has just been recently, actually the last several months, that we've moved away from it having to be, we all sit down at the dinner table and we eat and we talk to each other. And so now we might watch a show together, something we've kind of all gotten into I don't remember, like the junior baking competition.
oh yeah.
Yeah. And so, it's one of those things, it's something we can talk about and, well, what did you think? And oh, I really like that. Or, oh, that'd be interesting. Maybe we should try making that. And it's given us a little bit of a different connection point. We've kind of grown past that. But I really struggled with that idea, like you should not be watching TV while you're having your family dinner. Like you have to. And so it was also for me a big, like, actually, it doesn't have to look that way. It doesn't have to be that way. Let's try it. If it works, then it's working. And that's what happened, right? Like we tried it, it worked. So we're still doing it. If it stops working or it's become clear that it's not, then we'll do something else, right?
Yeah.
And you really get to do that with homeschooling.
Yeah, you can tweak and retool anytime.
Yep.
And it doesn't have to look like what everybody else is doing, right? I mean, we are together a lot in my family, right? And we love that. I mean, I love having that connection with my kids and having them home. But yeah, I mean, it's very different than a family who's together 2 hours a day. And so, yeah, that definite cornerstone of their schedule is going to be a little bit different than ours will be, which is pretty cool. I wrote down, so this is very much a Meagan perspective, from a very unschooling perspective, but, there's a lot of like, how many hours a day are you homeschooling and stuff like that. And we do not have a set schedule, as I said, but, one of the things that I think I see a lot of conversation about, which is like, my kids are not interested in anything. They don't want to do anything. If they're not doing schoolwork, they're just on their phone playing a game, lazing around. Like there's no spark, there's no interest. And for me, from my perspective on education, I think a huge part of that is kind of this danger mindset of having school time versus not school time, right? And so I saw that. So my oldest only went to school through second grade, but in kindergarten, he was in this classroom and they had what they would call Fun Fridays on Friday. And it was the centers. They would go table to table and do their centers activity. And the centers were categorized as fun on Friday, right? So I have, he's autistic ADHD. And if you tell a kid that Fun Friday is a thing, what does that then make Monday through Thursday?
Not fun. Yeah.
Not fun, right? So he was like, and he said to me one day, we only get to have fun at school one day a week. And I was like, what do you mean? And he was like, well, because it's Fun Friday. And so to him, it was like the other 4 days, therefore, are not fun, right? And so I feel like in my approach to schooling, I've kind of taken that mentality where it's like, if you say like, these are our school hours, I feel like there's a thing with kids where they go, I did what you required of me. I did the thing. I did my, 10 to 2 or 10 to 1. I checked all the boxes that you asked me to. I'm done. And now you want something else from me? This is now my time. I gave you the time. Now this is my time. And so I feel like there's a mentality shift there that creates that lack of enthusiasm in things, because it's like, I did the bare minimum. I did the requirements. Leave me alone. This is now my time. I get to spend it staring at the wall if I want to. Right. And so I feel like by not having those school hours, not for you, because it's working for you, Amanda, I'm saying like, if somebody's not having it work, right, that kind of tossing that out and just being like, we have the whole day. Let's explore. Let's get stuff done. Let's dig into things and kind of breaking those scheduling barriers down, I find great for mindset around learning.
Yeah. Well, I can see that because as we've already established, we have pretty set these hours, and in our house, if we didn't, my kiddo needs quite a bit of structure, right? I found that earlier on. I wanted to not have so much structure, and he really was like, please buy me one more workbooks. And I was like, aren't you not supposed, like, and so we found this balance and it works for us. And it would be easy for him to get distracted and miss things, or, not have finished things by the end of the day if we didn't have this kind of structure in place. That said, I think in our home, one of the reasons that learning can continue to happen and he can still want to learn, even though we have some of those more set hours, is that we have a much more flexible yearly schedule. So we have talked a little here and there. I'm sure we'll talk about it more in the future, but we kind of homeschool year round. But the catch with that is we also travel a lot. And so, last October, we went and spent a month in Ethiopia and Madagascar. And we did take our stuff with us, and we did do some online classes, not many because we didn't have the internet to be able to do it. And, he had some specific things to read and learn about the countries that we were in. But the workload was much less. There was not the set, we work from this time to this time. It was very much like, bring your computer. We're going to go to the restaurant where you can get on the Wi-Fi, and we'll have lunch and you can do some stuff on the Wi-Fi. And then we're going to go to the beach, or we're going to go do this tour. We're going to do this thing. And, it's much more loosey-goosey around that. And we also will have then, weeks where we just don't do anything, right? We did like a 3-week trip to Lapland, Finland at Christmas time. And then we went to Belgium and France. And we did learn, right? We went on history tours, and he really wanted to see the Eiffel Tower and these kinds of things. And we did that, right? And obviously that's organic learning. And that's one of the great things about homeschooling. But it was a huge step away from the stuff that we usually do. We didn't bring any books. We didn't bring any textbooks. There was no curriculum. There was no online class he had to log in for. And that extended past when all the other kids were in school, because we usually travel when all the other kids are in school. It's cheaper, right? You get cheaper flights, you get cheaper
Less crowded.
hotels. Yeah, it's less crowded. You get a lot more time to do all of the things. But I think the fact that we have these weeks thrown in throughout the year that do that, so it's not so much a like, all right, you have to slog through this and you have to slog through that, and then you get this chunk and you better make the most of it, because if you're getting burnt out, you can't say, you know what, we need a week off. And we can. We can.
Right.
We do. We do a lot. Actually, we travel at least 4 months of the year, and it's not all in the summer. And so, there's different ways to achieve that balance when you're homeschooling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'd love to talk about, while we're on the subject of kind of what you were just saying about requirements then from your state, right?
Mm.
So, do you have because you're working off a charter schedule, right? So is that just you have like a school calendar from the charter? Is that how it works?
We do. Yeah, we have a school calendar, and we have like school holidays.
Okay.
At some point, my kid might actually care enough to look at it and realize that he does schoolwork on school holidays all the time. At this point, he doesn't care, right? And but also, again, it's that flexibility of things. Technically, our charter school only gives 1 week of spring break, but his 2 best friends attend a different school, a brick and mortar school that gives 2 to 3 weeks of spring break. And he likes to go to spring break camps with those friends. And so I'm like, okay, that's fine. You're going to a theater camp or you're going to a science camp, like that counts as school for the week. And our spring break then oftentimes ends up being 3-4 weeks long. Is it actually spring break? No, but he's getting a break from his textbooks and his curriculum, and he thinks he's having a blast. I know he's learning. I know he's learning new skills and practicing new things, but he's hanging out with his friends, and they have play dates afterwards. We'll coordinate like a pickup, and we'll just go to the park and let him play unstructured and whatever, so it works for us. And we're really fortunate. I'm not going to lie. Like, we're in the charter system, but we had I mentioned before that he just finished his assessments and he's a couple grades ahead. And, he does well. And because he does well and the school has no concerns, for the most part, they leave us alone. Um, and not everyone is that lucky, right? Like, it's a specific combination of factors that allows us to work at our own pace, and it's a pretty advanced pace. But also, you say, yeah, sure, we learned, and they're like, okay, great.
Check. Right?
Yeah.
Check.
And we have to certify every 20 days. We have to certify that we did schoolwork on these 20 days, or if there was some school holidays in there, we certify we did schoolwork on these 18 days. My version of schoolwork is going to be different than an unschooler's version of schoolwork, but they both can say, yes, we did schoolwork on those 18 days.
Mm-hmm.
And no one is actually, yes, it's a charter school. That's a public school here in California. And so you're supposed to do schoolwork Monday to Friday. But, if you just totally took Wednesday off and then you made muffins on Saturday as a family, like, that counts. You did your schoolwork for the week. You got all 5 days in, you're fine.
Yeah. You can fudge it on the paper. It's all fine.
I mean, that's it. You still did 5 days and you're fine. Right? It's
right.
fine.
It would be different than complete educational neglect and checking the boxes for 20 days, right?
Yeah.
That's not what we're saying.
No, absolutely not.
But the flexibility piece, yes, that's fine.
Yeah, exactly.
So there are some states that require a certain number of hours per day or hours per year or something like that. And I do not live in one of those states. It wouldn't bother me even if I did, because I'd have no problem being like, yes, 100%, we totally made that happen. Legitimately, right? But it throws a lot of people off because they are thinking if they need 5 hours a day or whatever it is, that is sitting at a desk, doing workbooks, taking tests, etc., for 5 hours a day. Even from an academic homeschooler perspective, Amanda, is that how you would interpret that rule?
No, that's not how we would do it. I mean, and in fairness, we do almost every single day. We get 5 hours a day in, just because of the way that our schedule is. But it certainly doesn't look like him sitting in his desk and me lecturing him on things and going over workbooks together and stuff. That would be miserable. We would both hate it. We would not survive very long if that's how we were homeschooling.
Yeah, no, that wouldn't be fun for anyone, right? So I put together a game for us from homeschool regulations perspective, right? Does it count as homeschooling? Are you ready? I'm going to quiz you and see. And there's no right or wrong answer. This is like, how would Amanda gauge this?
Okay.
I would gauge. I'm not going to tell you. Okay. You already know. Homeschool field day.
Absolutely.
PE, right? Done. A day at co-op. Is that a school day?
Yes.
Bingo. A visit to a museum.
Yes.
Yeah. Baking a pie. You just said muffins, so I'm going to go with yes. Do you count pies as well?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's one of those, when you're older, home ec is absolutely a class and you get to count that. And when you're younger, you're practicing your fractions and your measurements and how you add things. Like, these are things, it's not rocket science. You might not have thought about it, right? You might need someone to actually spell it out. Hey, don't forget, like,
yeah, it's okay.
Yeah. These things are actual classes in school, right? They're actually actual classes in schools. If the school does it, you can do it too. Right? If the school does tests, you think you need to do tests, fine. The school does field trips. They take them to museums. They make them bake a pie, right? I don't know about a pie, actually. I had to make cookies. I'm pretty certain that my middle school home ec classmates could not have handled a pie, but
too much.
Yeah, that's a whole other story.
Okay, reading a pleasure book with absolutely no work associated with it.
So in our house, that would not count.
In our house, it absolutely does, because it's building vocabulary and you're still learning. There's usually elements of truth too that are in there, or it's building imagination or something like that. So that is an up for discretion. But if you're adding it, do not feel like you're cheating the system. You're totally fine. Listening to a podcast, there's like, does your kiddo have some favorites? Like, my kids like Greeking Out. There's Smash Boom Best is a debate podcast, stuff like that. Is that schoolwork? Does it count towards your hours?
We don't count it towards our hours. but I could see how other families would. Now, that is one of those things that in our house, we have that 3 p.m. and on is carved out as his free time. And he absolutely goes in his room and turns on a podcast. So he thinks that he's playing and having fun and it's all unstructured and he's totally still learning because he's,
Yeah.
He actually,
And that's the key. And if you do have a reluctant learner, and that's your way of, yes, 100%. If that is your entree into making learning amazing, that is, you're learning something. It's school, count it, do not feel guilty, go.
Get them some Wow in the World, some Brains On, some Greeking Out from Mount Olympus. There's so many fun ones.
Yeah, go for it, right? Mm-hmm. My kids like, and I don't know if they're still making new episodes, but there used to be one, A World Without, and they would do a thing with like a world without circles. And then they would imagine and go through all these scenarios of like what the world would look like if there weren't circles and stuff that you don't even think about that's a circle. And you're like, oh yeah, like how would that, what would you do? And all this kind of stuff. FYI, I don't know if it's entirely kid appropriate. I'm not a screener of content, so there might totally be language in there. So if you are a screener of content, don't just like take that and run with it and be like, here, kiddo. Let's see, building Legos, assembling puzzles, sewing stuff, schoolwork.
Yeah, I mean, the sewing, obviously, I took sewing in school, so sewing counts for sure. Building Legos is one of those things. A lot of people don't think that it counts. And it's another thing that happens in our house after 3 p.m. But I was just making a message to someone on Facebook of like, start including Legos in your scheduled school time as you start figuring this out, because Legos are amazing, right? If you're free building, you're working on divergent thinking. If you are building a set or a kit that's already there, or you found the cute little ones that you find on Pinterest and hey, we're going to make a bunch of little farm animals or whatever, and you're trying to follow the directions, you're working on convergent thinking. Like these are solid skills that we know kids need to work on. They're covered in curriculum. Actually, there's an entire curriculum that's based on Legos if you need to go that way to get your kid interested, because you're coming in and you're like, oh, how are we going to find the fun in learning again? Like Legos absolutely count as schooling. In fact, here's one other random plug. If you need to buy Legos, buy the educational sets. You can buy an educational set on Amazon. They're harder to find because they don't actually want you to know about it, but it's a ton of normal regular Lego blocks for a fraction of the price. Buy educational Lego sets.
Good to know. Yeah. I was going to say, we actually have a mutual friend, Lily, who is a former classroom teacher turned amazing homeschool mom, who's teaching a Lego multiplication class this fall, which is going to be amazing because it is entirely hands-on, which makes it stick better in the brain. Amanda knows all the science behind all that stuff because she likes to research it. I'm just like, using your hands makes learning stick. Like, Amanda will fill you in on the science. I'm like, this is common sense. So it'll stick better, right? It's more fun. It's Legos. And Lily is amazing. So yeah, I mean, and she and a couple of other teachers, there's addition, there's fractions, there's decimals, there's all kinds of stuff. But we happen to be friends with Lily, who's teaching multiplication, which is pretty awesome. So there's so many ways that you can incorporate Legos and make learning awesome. So there is no wrong way to schedule your homeschool day, right? And when you are thinking about your days of the year and your hours and all that kind of stuff, 100%. I mean, we were in New York. It was only last week. It feels like a month ago, but we were in New York and my kiddo spent hours at Mood Fabrics in New York City, which is one of the biggest fabric stores in the country, probably, in the leather department. She was talking to the people who work there and asking questions about leather and stuff like that. It was a project for fashion school. And then she and her best friend went to the Met and went to a weaving exhibit and all this kind of stuff. That is 100% a school day. She never touched anything, curriculum related or anything like that. But the amount of learning that took place was incredible. And the sticking power of it, because of how amazing an experience it was, unparalleled. So do not feel guilty counting that stuff as school days. I see stuff all the time where people are like, oh my gosh, we have a field day and I can't, or we have a field trip and I can't get, I'm like, yes, why are you not counting that? You're fine.
Did your kid not love, fine. Like when you were a kid in school, did you not love field trip day?
Yeah.
Like
Yes.
everyone was like, yes, field trip day. We don't actually have to do work. You better believe the school still reported that you were there and they got their state
Yeah.
funding for that day. They weren't like, oh, we didn't do any learning. Don't pay us for the day, right? Like they got their money.
Exactly.
You
That
get
was one of their
yours.
180 days, right?
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
can do the same thing, right?
Mhm.
I mean, at this point in the year, it's end of May. It's coming up on Memorial Day weekend here, right? I mean, they are playing games, watching movies. Everybody is burnt out, right? And
Yep.
there's still school days. So when you're burnt out, when you don't feel good, when a kid doesn't feel good, you know, if you're snuggled up on the couch and you want to throw on History Channel and watch Forged in Fire all day and have a marathon, that's a school day. So do not stress. We give you permission to,
Mhm.
to roll with it, which is pretty awesome to have. If you find that you are still struggling with scheduling or anything homeschool related, did you know that both Amanda and myself offer one-on-one homeschool coaching or two-on-one homeschool coaching? You can get both of us. There is a link in our bio on Instagram and also a link in the descriptions wherever the podcast is published that you are watching it, where you can hop on and schedule. We offer consulting sessions. And each of our bios tells you a bit more about kind of what we specialize in, right? I know nothing about California charter system. I cannot help you with spelling curriculum, but I can help you write a high school transcript, right? So we each kind of have our strengths that we focus on. If you're brand new to homeschooling and you're like, I don't even know where I fall on the spectrum of homeschooling and kind of how I want to approach this, then it might be worthwhile to connect with both of us and kind of get two different perspectives on your individual questions. But if you're looking for something specific, you can book with either one of us as well, which is pretty awesome. So it is time for one of our amazing end of day segments. Ready for our intro? Here we
Yes.
go.
Recommended resources. Do you need more homeschool supplies? No. Are you going to want these anyway? Absolutely.
Absolutely. I think the recommended resource should be your coffee mug that you've got there on screen. Amanda, what does your coffee mug say?
It says fueled by gangster rap and coffee.
Okay.
It was a gift from a friend who knows me well. And yeah, I have a thing for coffee mugs. I have all different kinds and certain ones that get used for this and ones that get used for that. So you'll occasionally see them make an appearance.
I love it. So what's our recommended resource for the week, Amanda?
So we're still doing pretty introductory things about getting started and what that looks like. So I'm going to offer a couple of things. First, in our house, we do a weekly schedule, and it is sort of broken down by day, but it's not 100%. It's an Excel spreadsheet that I made for tracking what we were doing each week. And we are going to we're going to have a link for it for you. You can get it for free. So you'll have both the filled out example of kind of what we do each week and how I set that spreadsheet up. And then there will be a blank one that you can edit yourself and put in your own classes or curriculum. I'm going to assume you're not going to do exactly what we do, and that's pretty cool. So yeah, that's a free resource that we are going to have available for anyone who wants to sign up for it. And then the other thing that I would like to recommend is a small whiteboard. So they make these whiteboards that are a little bit bigger than a piece of paper. Depending on the age of your kiddo, you might get one that has white, just blank on one side, and then the kind of lined paper on the other side. They have the 3 lines, with the dotted line in the middle. And that can be helpful if you're working on specific writing things and stuff like that with a younger one. Or you can get one that's just blank on both sides. But they are super helpful if you are working through a math problem together. It's helpful if you have a kid who needs more structure with what am I supposed to do today? So you might think, okay, Amanda gave me this great, I want structure. She gave me this great weekly list. And so I can record it and put it in a binder and know what we've done each week. But how do we know what the hell to do on day one, on Monday, on Tuesday? In our house, I will often write for the day. These are the things that need to be done today. And I expect you to spend 20 to 30 minutes on math. Please don't spend any more than 10 minutes on geography today. You spent 2 hours on it yesterday. The limit's 10 minutes, whatever that looks like. But I put that on that little whiteboard, and then you wipe it off and you keep reusing it, right? Like save a tree, use a whiteboard. So those are my 2 main recommendations for this week.
We are huge whiteboard fans in this house. I find them helpful even just for a really busy day when we need to, instead of me constantly saying, don't forget this, don't forget that, don't forget this, right? And especially we're a super neurodivergent household. So the minute I say, don't forget this, it's already gone.
Yeah.
And so having it there and that ability to wipe something off or scratch something out on the whiteboard is so powerful. We used to have them on every kid's door so that I could put reminders on there for them and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I'm a huge fan of a whiteboard. I totally love that. So yeah, you'll be able to find the links to download Amanda's amazing Excel files in the description for our podcast, in our Instagram bio, all that good stuff. And yeah, stay tuned. Our second episode of the week will be a book club episode. And we are kicking off a new book in our next week of podcasting, which is Normal Sucks by Jonathan Mooney. So if you want to join us and read along, you can. And if you don't, that's cool too. Either way it works. Still come and listen to the episodes. We'll tell you all the highs from the book. So it'll be good.
For sure.
Have an awesome day, everyone, and happy homeschooling.
Have a great one.